But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
Ryan? I don't know if that's the sound of your fan, but the background noise is back. And it's really bad.
An entire battalion of weaponized misogynists will be descending on hapless Chicago to forcefully fondle the city's innocence. With them are notorious fascist pug handler Count Dankula, rape joke enabler Sargon of Akkad, alt-right menace Mr. Reagan, Satan himself Paul Elam, and the devil's handmaid Karen Strawn. We have just received word from an expert in hateology that if you even so much as look upon this conference, your eyes will be burned out of your skull, your tongue will invert, and your anus will seethe from the union. We repeat, do not so much as glance at this convention and its related paraphernalia of evil.
Okay, so we are live. Mike J, are you still getting crazy sounds?
No, it sounds all right at the moment. I guess we'll wait and chime in and see what everyone else says.
Yeah, I don't think that they should be experiencing any of that. But I do want to say, for a second there, we did have an issue. Discord just crashed on me, but then it reopened. I don't know what that could be, but hopefully it won't be a problem anymore. So I guess I'll go ahead and pretend as though it's time for an intro. So welcome everyone to HBR News number 221, El Paso and Dayton shootings, symptoms of the same problem, but most don't know what it is, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Point of personal privilege, everybody. Just want to say, welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I am your host, Brian, and I'm joined by Mike J. Unfortunately, Hannah is not able to join us today because she has to work her nighttime job, and Dr. Rainer McCam is also not available because he is currently in Canada helping Alison do some run errands and do some rigmarole in preparation for next week's international conference on men's issues. So this will be the last show that I think I'm going to be able to do before the ICMI, because later this week I'm actually going to be at the American Psychological Association convention, and I'm going to be there with members of CAFE trying to help kind of push back on those APA guidelines for men. So I won't be available. I'll try to maybe, I don't know what's going to happen up there, but if I am able to, I'll try to maybe get like an interview or something from someone. Am I too low? Someone says I'm too low. Do I sound low to you, Mike?
You sound fine.
Okay. Oh, thank you for the subscription, Scuba Guy something 2. Well, anyway, so this is gonna be the last show for a little while, but it will still be a good one, so be sure to hang out. Mike, were you gonna say something?
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right, so we have a great show lined up for you guys today. Please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comments section. On this week's HBR News Show, we're going to be talking about the honks of the week, including the recent shootings at Dayton as well as El Paso, and the, I think it was a Garlic Fest in California, as well as the absolute state of Gillette and lawsuits against California universities and more. So please stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. Today's after show is a double feature because the articles are a little bit on the short side. We're going to be looking at the latest story coming from Tinseltown. Stories, really, all of which coming from the entertainment industry, wherein, I don't know if you know this, but Sylvester Stallone is working on, he's pitching a new television series that stars Dolph Lundgren. And he's going for an action TV show, which, if you guys are older like me, you might remember that TV shows used to actually have, there was a significant amount of action shows on television. They are all but completely dead now. So he's pitching this, And Disney turned them down at face value, didn't even want to hear about it because they say, the folks at Disney said, that their show is not female focused, which is what they want. In addition, this sort of, relatively inexperienced screenwriter, and I believe that she's a showrunner, Jack Schaefer, who is in charge of the upcoming WandaVision and Black Widow properties, is going to ensure that these comic book action movies have less comic book, less action, and more inclusion so that it's more in line with her value system. Sounds like a blast, but at least they're not lying about it anymore. So anyway, if you guys want to be a part of the after show, you have to become a Badger by going to feedthebadger.com. You could also, I think we still have a Patreon presence, and so you can use that if you, for whatever reason, don't want to use Feed the Badger, but we recommend feedthebadger.com as our let's say, our time on Patreon is likely limited. I think it's only a matter of time before we're all gone from these different these kinds of platforms. So why not just cut out the middleman and come straight over to us, feedthebadger.com. If you start a monthly subscription, then it'll get you into the Discord, it'll get you access to the after shows. Either you can just watch them just like other shows where we have members who are also, our patrons in there with us, or if you give enough, you can be in the talk with us. And there's all sorts of levels in between. So go to feedthebadger.com and set up a monthly subscription. Also, before we get started, please hit that like button right now. Pound that like. I'm going to actually make, on my other channel, I'm going to work on a character named Like Chan. So you guys can hit Like Chan, and that maybe that'll get us more likes. I don't know. So maybe you need a waifu to get it to work. But yeah, please hit the like button and subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and hit that bell for notifications. Okay, so if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, then go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. That's where all of the content it lives in one place, as it were. So with all that out of the way, I haven't lost Mike J, and he's still here, so we can actually get into the story. So far, so good. So let's talk about these recent mass shootings. So Mike J, I'm gonna give you the floor.
All right, this one's not gonna be a fun one, unfortunately. And it's also gonna be pretty long. There's a lot of stuff to get through, and let's just get into it. So, a string of mass shootings perpetrated over the weekend has left a nation in shock. 3 separate incidents, one in El Paso, Texas, one in Dayton, Ohio, one in Gilroy, California, has left over 30 dead and at least 65 injured. The attack in El Paso was committed by Patrick Crusius, age 22, who entered a Walmart shopping center on the morning of August the 3rd and opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle, killing 22 and injuring 26. Crusius surrendered to police shortly afterwards without incident. While a motive for the attack has not been officially released by police, a manifesto posted to website 8chan before the attack seems to have come from Crusius. The manifesto criticizes both parties in the U.S. and negatively references Hispanic immigration, while also praising the Christchurch mosque shooter. While police are investigating the manifesto, they cannot say for sure if it was penned by the shooter. Crusius is currently being held in a downtown El Paso jail. Less than a day later, in the early hours of August the 4th, Connor Betts, age 24, attacked bystanders outside of a bar in Dayton, Ohio. Betts used a semi-automatic rifle to kill at least 9 people, including his own sister, and injure 27 others. In less than a minute after the shooting began, Betts was shot dead by patrolling police officers in the area. Motives for the shooting remain unknown at this time. Many details about Betts' personal life have surfaced since the shooting. Betts was a troubled youth in high school and was described by many as a bully. He appears to have been expelled from high school for keeping a hit list. An ex-girlfriend states he shared his violent fantasies with her on multiple occasions, which was one factor which led to their breakup. Betts was also bipolar and suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder, according to this same ex-girlfriend. His Twitter account reveals he was a staunch Democrat, that he was unhappy with the outcome of the 2016 election, and that he would have voted for Elizabeth Warren, and identified as a socialist. Towards the end of August the 4th, in Gilroy, California, on the last day of the Gilroy Garlic Festival, a gunman opened fire. Santinio Willem Ligon, aged 19, fired upon festival-goers with a semi-automatic rifle, killing 3 and injuring 12. Local police officers were able to intervene just minutes after the shooting began and shot Ligon dead. Of the 3 shooters, Ligon and his motives remain the most mysterious. Ligon appears to have little to no online activity. The most that can be found is a few posts on Instagram, none of which give any solid reasons for the shooting. Mainstream publications were quick to suspect that Ligon was a white supremacist based off of materials found at his apartment, but the FBI was quick to denounce that theory. A search of Ligon's apartment yielded body armor, a gas mask, and empty ammo cans. It is believed he was working on a larger attack.
All right. Thanks for that. There is a lot there. And I guess I want to read. Hannah said she couldn't make it today, but she did write something up. She wanted to say something about this. Now, the Dayton shooting, if you guys aren't already aware, Hannah lives in Dayton. And she said that while none of this had affected her personally, and that obviously, her and her family are safe, one of the things that she thought was really strange and creepy was that guy was familiar. She saw his face and said that she feels like she'd seen before, and she learned that he attended the same college as her son. So there is a bit of a connection there. But Hannah wanted to say something, and she sent this to me in a DM, and I'm going to read it for you guys, and then we'll get into the maybe talk a little bit about it, because I think that the way that these incidents are being discussed are not constructive, and they are doing more harm than good. And so they're never going to get to the source of the problem, because they aren't willing to identify the problem. But this is just my speculation, so maybe I'm wrong. All right, let me read Hannah's thing first. I'm going to be leaving for work in a bit, but wanted to touch base since you're going to talk about the shootings tonight. One very significant thing to me about the Dayton shooting is that the young man who did it was not taken seriously when he made threats as a student in high school, which Mike J already told us about. From the reporting that has come out since, it appears to have been that way with serial red flags. Our feminist-run school system and our gynocentric society seems to have responded to warning signs of a young man's impending snap by putting a somebody else's problem field around him and walking away. And that's after his public school career, during which he likely spent 12 years hearing that he's toxic and defective because he's male instead of female. Now we have the left blaming guns and the mental health care system, and the right blaming abandonment of religious conservatism and video games. Both are being incredibly stupid. A young man whose breakdown is going to involve lashing out isn't going to be prevented from doing so because he can't use a gun to do it. And he's not going to get help from a mental health system that has adopted the narrative that any suffering that he's experiencing is because he's male and therefore toxic. Morality and social bubble wrap are no remedy for the issues that lead to a personal breakdown either. One doesn't lash out like this because a game had guns in it. It takes a bigger set of problems in a person's life to lead to this. It hasn't occurred to any of the talking heads that no systemic band-aid is going to fix the phenomenon as long as our society and the systems we let our government use on us have that tendency to treat troubled young men as an inconvenience rather than as people, each with his own individual set of issues that need to be addressed before said issues lead to a breakdown. While most young men's breakdown comes in the form of self-destructive behaviors whose impact on others is caused mainly by the loss of that young man, there will always be a small percentage whose snap takes an outward form like this, and the problem will continue as long as our society continues that treatment of them. This phenomenon has a multitude of likely causes, each with each case having its own spectrum, but our society's failure to properly address it as a direct result of a lack of recognition of the individual human needs and vulnerability of men and boys. All right, so that's Hannah's thing. And for the most part, that's pretty much where I was going with it. The other thing is that I've seen other people talk about this. And one of the things, I've heard a couple things, like Louis Levi, and these are people that I like, okay? Louis Levi was talking about how, you need to, like, get off the internet. These are people who are addicted to social media on the internet or forum spaces or something like that. And they need to, like, get out and, and it sounds like an oversimplification, but I know what he's getting at. There can be, especially with young men, I think, a desire to want to participate in online communities because you feel like you belong to something. But you have to ask yourself why that's happening in the first place. And I think that what we are looking at, I wouldn't be surprised, okay? And maybe, Mike, you did a lot of research on all three of these people, that from what we know about them, right? Do you know how how their family life was like, if they had their fathers in their lives, that kind of thing?
Well, for the first one, Connor Betts, I definitely do know that his father was in his life.
Uh-huh.
And they appear to line up decently well enough in terms of at least online presence. They were both rather on the left. Again, the thing we can look at is they all had very massive online presences in this family. You can see them talking to each other on Facebook, talking to each other on Twitter, and they don't seem to have had the worst of relationships. Also, depending on how much stock you put in his ex-girlfriend's, kind of,
Yeah.
Assertions
that he
testimony.
was bipolar and all that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But she actually came out with a much, much, much longer blog post today.
Uh-huh.
And said that he might not have gotten along with his family as well, but this was in relation to him killing his own sister, which she finds the most puzzling of all of this, because apparently they were very close to each other. And some people are tossing around the theory that might have been mistaken identity, that he didn't intend to shoot her, it was just wrong place, wrong time. Because, again, you have some accounts saying that basically they being his sister and her boyfriend, drove them to the area where the shooting happened.
Yeah.
And we have nothing, again, concrete on that right now. But the boyfriend did survive the shooting, so possibly in the coming days we might learn more.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's a lot of question marks. And that's kind of the same thing for all three of these cases.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the family of the other two?
Yeah,
Patrick Crusius, he definitely did not have a good home life.
Uh-huh.
You have references to a police report that was filled out when he was 14 that he ran away from home. I believe he wasn't living with his parents at the time of it. I think he was living at the house of his grandparents, whether they were there or not. I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah.
But he seems to have had probably the worst home life of all three of these. And then you've got Santino Willem Ligon, and this guy is just a complete unknown. There is so little that is actually solidly known about him. We actually know more about his family, and his family was actually quite prominent in Gilroy, California.
Mm-hmm.
His father held some kind of public office. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Another thing is that the Patrick Crusius guy, he's the one from the El Paso shooting.
Correct.
while he was critical of both parties, and look, this shouldn't matter, but we need to point out these facts, because I think that the truth about what's causing this doesn't have that much to do with politics. I think that this is just there's something deeper and much darker at work here. Nobody feels this strongly about politics at that young of an age. There has to be something like that puts them on this. Essentially, we're looking at people that are self-destructing, but it just so happens they're hurting other people as they do it. Okay. But my understanding is the guy from El Paso, they're calling him, a white supremacist and all this other stuff, just like the California garlic shooter, which there's no evidence for. But because he had issues with immigration,
the entire evidence. I want to get over this fast because there wasn't enough place to put this down in the write-up. The whole reason why they called Lagana a white supremacist is in one of the very, very, very few posts he made to social media. Let me see if I can find the exact post here. He basically suggests reading this book, Might is Right. And apparently the guy that wrote it was... and the book's very anti-Semitic. The book is very, the weak have to do what they do. The weak must fall because the strong are the strong.
Yeah,
and stuff
the weak
like
must
that.
fear the strong. So whoever wrote that was an edgy boy before there were edgy boys.
Very, very, very edgy. And this might have been one of the quote-unquote white supremacist electronic materials that they found at his apartment, because this guy had an apartment just in I think like the middle of nowhere, Nevada, where he had a whole bunch of other weapons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Then that's all they had to go on, and they were so ready to jump on this. Oh yeah, he's a white supremacist narrative, and the FBI basically stepped in and said, "Hold up, no, you guys got this wrong. I'm sorry." And the other thing too was the guy wasn't. I mean, okay, by some standards he could be called white, but he identified as Italian and Iranian.
Well, there you go. And also the El Paso guy, from what I read somewhere, that he did this because of environmental concerns. That he was concerned about the environment.
Where did you hear that? I'm very curious.
Well, someone was talking about it on another. I think it was actually Sargon that brought it up. That he had. It wasn't on the Heavy article, but it was somewhere else. Or he essentially believed that the immigration was going to make the environment worse. It was some weird idea that because. The United States, in his mind, was already like, a country that was responsible for all the carbon emissions and all that, that more people in the country were going to create more carbon emissions. And, my understanding is, according to what Sargon said, he was having a discussion with Louis about it. And again, I don't know this for sure, but, I wouldn't be surprised if, I could see that happening, because I think that, blaming video games, and this is something that there have been studies done on, video games and music and pastimes, they don't really radicalize people unless those people are prone to it already, in which case it doesn't really take these kinds of entertainment to do that. But what can make people act is when they believe that they are learning the truth. The news media can affect people, because if they don't question it and they take it at face value, it can have negative effects on you. And so if the mainstream media is going on and on about climate change and the dangers, and like AOC is saying in 15 or 12 years or whatever the world's going to end, I could see how people become like pretty crazy radical environmental terrorist types or something like that. I could see how that could happen. Just like the people who, and I say this with all sympathy, but just like the guy who shot all those cops, I think it was in the South, a couple of years ago, he was a Black Lives Matter guy that shot and killed multiple police officers. He was acting on what he thought was an imminent threat. And again, I'm not saying that he was right, but I can understand how that can have influence over people. So there is that as well. But again, even with this gentleman, the El Paso guy, is it Cruzius? I get these guys mixed. Yeah, Cruzius is the El Paso guy. It doesn't really matter, because what we're looking at is what I believe, and this is what Hannah said, is the manifest, the masculinity crisis taking form. This is how it expresses itself. Men are looking for something to, they want to mean something. They need that. Men desire meaning and they want purpose in life. And we live, I hate to say it this way, but we live in a society that demonizes masculinity at every turn, which we're going to get to because we're going to talk about the Gillette ad next. And these guys are raised they're raised by an education system that doesn't cater their needs. Oh, another thing I was wondering about too is how many are any of these guys on any medication, like for anything, autism, Asperger's?
I couldn't find anything solid about the El Paso shooter Patrick Crusius. Connor Betts, like I said, according to his ex-girlfriend, was bipolar and suffered from OCD. If he was on something, I do not know, but with those two, I wouldn't be surprised. And in the apartment that the guy from the Gilroy shooting, Santino Willem Lagan, in his apartment, they found an empty bottle of Valium. So it's possible that he was taking that. Okay.
All right. So yeah, so we're basically medicating men. We're putting them through a feminized education system. We're surrounding them with misandric rhetoric. It's just all over the place. And some of them, they take it on willingly. Progressives do, right? Progressive men tend to say, yes, I do feel the need to atone for my sins as a man, and I need to do whatever it takes. This is how come these kinds of guys end up joining groups like Antifa, because they're trying to make up for the sin that they have, the original sin that they're carrying. And some men that rebel against it, so let's go ahead and let's just say for the sake of assumption that Patrick Crusius is a right-wing extremist. He would be rebelling against the narrative, but it would make him prone to just as much self-destructive behavior, because both of them are accepting the terms, which is you are to blame for all of the ills of society because you are male, because you are white or pass as white, and because you are straight, I guess. And I assume these guys are probably all straight too, but I don't think that came up as much. It's mostly about the white male thing. And I think that really it's about the male thing at the end of the day. So, I mean, how else do you expect them to act? And look, again, this isn't me saying it's okay. I think it's terrible and it's tragic and it's really unfortunate. But if you look at how the mainstream media is talking about this, they're either on the left, they want to take the guns away, they want to talk about toxic masculinity, they want to demonize men more, they want to, restrict everyone's freedoms and all of that. And they want to use this as an opportunity to control the narrative that they have such a firm grip on already. And people on the conservative side are getting it all wrong because they think it's video games or a lack of, Christian values or whatever.
Well, don't sell the left short. They're blaming it on video games too.
Oh yeah, that's true. They'll blame it on video games too. But they're all wrong. The point is, and some of them, I don't think that. I'm not really sure about people on the conservative side, but because I think the left has bought into their own rhetorics to the point where they're 100% positive that this is the result of a president that tweets mean things and toxic masculinity and people having access to assault rifle, pistol, machine guns. And that's basically what we need to correct, all of those things. And we live in a society, that's what they would say. We live in a patriarchal, oppressive society, and they're just using their male privilege or whatever. And the conservative side would try to grasp at straws to figure out what the problem is. And all they can come up with is media. I mean, Donald Trump himself came out and said that we should look at, the problem with video games. And I would say, no, you're a moron. That's wrong. But I know that they don't know. They're just grasping at straws because the one thing they haven't done is actually looked at the fact that these are men and try to figure out what the problem with men is. And that is it. But as long as men remain invisible in terms of like how we discuss these societal issues, which they persist on doing, because there's all this cover that's being run by the people who are supposed to care about human beings that happen to all be leftist feminist types, or at least most of them. Look at the APA. I'm going to be going to the APA convention this weekend. The APA, according to their own guidelines, would drive men to do this by the way that they take care of them. They don't know what men need. They have it wrong, and they're supposed to be the authority on this. So it's a shame because no one's talking about this the right way. The issue is we need to talk about male suffering. We need to be compassionate about it. And that means that we need to look at these shooters with a degree of compassion because they are human. And we have to figure out what caused this. Because it seems like when these young men just kill themselves, no one talks about it. Only their immediate family, loved ones, people that are closest to them. It doesn't make the news, unless they're super famous or something. Nobody cares. But when they decide, I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to attempt to kill myself, but I'm going to try and take down as many other people with me as possible, or they just say, I don't give a shit about the world anymore because it hates me, I'm going to hate it back. And so they lash out in an explosive way. All of a sudden, everyone's paying attention. But they're paying attention to all the wrong things. They're trying to score political points. They're trying to, make a case for their party and how their party is better than this guy's party. Or they want to, Ilhan Omar will come out and say, we need to worry about white male terrorism, domestic terrorism, whatever. But no one actually wants to talk about what it really is. And this is like the reason why this problem will never be solved, because they won't look at what's right in front of them because they can't see it. So, Mike J, do you have any other thoughts on these stories? I'm sorry I talked too much, but you have to cut me off.
Not particularly. I mean, there's just I expect this week we're going to learn a lot more about what went on in a lot of these cases. I'm very, very interested to hear what the authorities in El Paso say about Crucius, because apparently he is fully cooperating with authorities right now.
Yeah. And
one, I forget who it said, but said he had quite a bit to say. So we're definitely going to find out something, I believe, this week. We're just waiting for some sort of announcement from them, and that could take a little bit of time.
I'm surprised no one's made a McLovin joke in the chat about this guy. I mean, I'm just adding a little bit of levity, but you got to admit, it's kind of funny. So.
I have seen people make similar statements.
Yeah. Okay, so there was one other thing I wanted to bring up, too. This weekend that just passed in Chicago, I think there have been 60 deaths by gun. 60. None of it's made the news. Not on this scale. You know why? Because the people that are being killed and the people who are doing the killing are not the right skin color. And the reason why I bring this up is not because I want to distract away from these shootings. It's to make the point that's a part of this larger point that I'm trying to make. There are men that are lashing out, no matter what, they're black, they're white, they're brown, it doesn't matter. And they all have issues. And there are people who are straight up like they're intentionally ignoring certain instances because it's about their politics. It's not about these men. And all of these men need our help, no matter what their color is. But they're playing this game. This is important to remember. So I'm only pointing out the number of killings that's happened in Chicago, and this is not an unusual, it's a common occurrence, right? The only reason why I'm pointing it out is because the issue with what's happening in Chicago, what happened in Dayton, what happened in California, and what happened in El Paso is all stemming from the same place. So just remember that. Okay, so the DCV Titan gives us $5 Canadian and says, and all interest in the Widow movie just flew out the window with a mighty yeet. Way to go, Marvel. Yeah, well, they're dead, dude. They're dead. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, given his history, did he own the gun or just use it? I don't know which shooter you're talking about.
As far I think I can talk that. As far as I've been able to tell, all three of them legally acquired their weapons, and they were in their names and everything like that. I think the only one that actually broke a crime in talking about firearm law was the California one, because he purchased it in Nevada and then took it into California. And I believe just with the type of weapon that was and the features on it, would have been illegal to own in California.
Uh-huh. Well, there you go. You have your answer. All right. So that's it for those stories. And if you guys want to see some more about this, I do recommend you watch Louis Levi's video on the shootings, Sargon's video on the shootings, and especially, I think it's it's on Paul's channel, Paul Elam, and you can find it on Tom Golden's, where it's called Regarding Men, and Paul Elam, Tom Golden, and Janice Villamengo, all of whom are going to be at the ICMI, by the way, they spoke about this issue in the same kind of light that we've talked about it. And that is, look, we could be wrong. It's possible that these guys they're just hateful people and they had perfect lives and all of that. But I think we should definitely be asking this question, because when, let's change the genders, okay? Because I've seen people saying, well, women don't do this stuff. Well, but what do women do when they self-destruct? Like, how do men self-destruct in violent ways? They either most of the time they just take it out on themselves. Like, for every mass shooter, there's 40 men that just commit suicide. So most of the time they just take it out on themselves. It's also important to point out, for those of you guys who are not in the United States, despite the fact that you're seeing these news stories coming out so frequently, I believe mass shootings have actually been going down. It's just
drastically, easily.
Easily.
It's a trend that's been going down for years. We just hear about it more often now because, number one, we're all glued to every form of media that exists now, and because when it happens, that's all they talk about. I mean, every 24/7 news cycle becomes set on this. This is a conversation I have with my grandparents quite often. Mm-hmm. They'll sit there and be like, well, this stuff didn't happen when we were younger. This stuff didn't happen when we were kids. And it's like, no, it was happening. There was just simply no apparatus in place for you to hear about it.
Yeah.
One of the deadliest mass shootings in school history happened in the 1920s, called the Bath School Disaster. Look it up. This guy used dynamite and a hunting rifle to kill, I think, over 40 students.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane. And like I said, all he had was a hunting rifle and explosives. And I think a truck. And you can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
You don't need, an AR-15 to cause a great amount of harm. I mean, look at the fire in Japan that guy started at the animation studio. How many people did that end up killing? Something in the 20s, I think?
Yeah, it was something like over 20 people. I thought it was 18, but I think when I saw that, they were still figuring out how many deaths there were. So it's probably gone up since then. But yeah, no, this is a downtrend. It's just that with social media, with the, people to get the news really fast, and especially local news can get out in front of people. So if this had happened in the 80s, this Patrick Crusius story, for example, it probably wouldn't have been as widespread because it would have been like considered to be local news. It may have gotten a mention, but there wouldn't be a media circus around it. Even if you did learn about it, it would just come and go. But because of this, like, let's say 24-hour news cycle, this instant internet news, social media thing that we have, it just feels like it's happening more frequently, but it's really not. French Honey Badger gives us $10 and says, there were X amount of shootings since the beginning of the year. How many of those happened in Chicago between gangs? Because we're supposed to assume that mass shootings are done by white people. Well, that's why they leave the color out. I mean, and it's not just Chicago, by the way. There are cities that are more violent, I'll have you know. But yeah, like Chicago, DC, Baltimore, Detroit, sure. But that's the thing, though. They just pay attention to the language. That's how you know whether or not they're talking about.
The other thing that they pull off is, which is a little bit disingenuous, is a mass shooting event.
Has to
I
be
believe
3 or more.
only needs 3 or
yeah.
I believe it was 3 or more people.
Yeah, 3 or more. That's what it has to be. And
But
they
you
don't have
can
to
have
die.
person A
They
shoot
don't-
at person B,
They don't
and
have to
have
die.
a person C as a bystander, and that's somehow counted as a mass shooting.
Yes. And people don't have to die for it to count as a mass shooting too. Because most of the
That's true.
time, the thing about gangbangers is they can't shoot for shit. So, most of the time. But they don't have a problem shooting, but they can't shoot. So, but yeah, it just, the problem with gangs is the same problem that there is with these young, let's say, mass shooters or even like radicals that are part of larger political terror organizations. Even I would argue that even suicide bombers and like religious fundamentalist extremist types that kill themselves, it's a crisis of masculinity. It's people weaponizing masculinity. It's men that they're just broken and they lash out. And we're not.
Angry young men growing up with no fathers.
Yep. Exactly. Like gangs are families for other gang members. So because they don't have their home families are usually broken. And it's not just because the father is missing. There's other stuff that comes with it. The mother beats them because she has to keep them in line because she doesn't have any help. She's not around. There's just like they're just not getting what they need, and so they go out of the home to find it. That puts them in a position where they run into other young men who have the same problems, and they're like, oh, you're dad's not around. Well, my dad's not around either. Let's hang out together and we'll learn from each other. And so their fathers become their peers who know as much about the world as they do, or maybe a little bit more. And that's how you form gangs. And that's what happens. So anyway, but I repeat myself because I'm pretty sure I brought that up many times before. So let's go on to the next story. We're going to be talking about Gillette. Did they get woke and go broke? Well, we'll find out in just a second here. Did hashtag boycott Gillette hurt Procter & Gamble? If you were waiting to see the result of the consumer response to Gillette's feminist commercials, Breitbart is now reporting an $8 billion loss for the parent company, Procter & Gamble. This could be evidence of the going broke part for getting so woke. They were so woke, if you need a reminder, that Gillette commercial spotlighting masculinity and the hashtag MeToo movement depicted scenes of bullying, sexual harassment, and mansplaining, asking, quote, "Is this the best a man can get?" end quote. P&G is partially blaming the loss in the most recent quarter on, quote, market contraction of blades and razors, primarily in developed markets, as men continue to grow out their facial hair. According to Breitbart, quote, Gillette helped to drag P&G into the red for the fiscal fourth quarter, with a net loss of $5.24 billion for the consumer goods giant, compared to net income of $1.89 billion a year ago. It may be that the best a man can get is elsewhere. So that was my wife that wrote that up. Thank you, my dear. So The thing about the Gillette thing, it's actually difficult to know for sure that because everybody's been talking about the $8 billion loss. But the thing is that we're not talking about Gillette. We're talking about Procter and Gamble. And that's a much like they're a huge company with a massive umbrella. And Agent Smith has it right. He says it's not $8 billion in lost revenue. It's just an asset devaluation. Right. So I think what they lost is something like 3%. It's not really that bad.
Yeah, it is quite literally a drop in the bucket.
Yes. And so they didn't lose that much. And here's another thing too. I learned something else like more recently. I think it was like today I found this out. The marketing team at Gillette, at Procter and Gamble, they actually said they don't care if this caused them to lose any money. They're willing to lose customers because they believe in the message in this advertising. So this isn't like from someone at the company said this. And I think we should just take them at their face. So there you go. They're okay with it. And this is like, this rings true, or this sort of sounds like, what was the game company? Was it EA that said, if you don't like it, don't buy it? And people said, fuck it. It was Battlefield 5, right? Yeah, it was
Battlefield 5.
Yeah, that's right. So they're okay with this because they didn't lose that much. And that really pretty much emboldened them to just keep going. So, and yeah, it's Procter & Gamble's very difficult to boycott, man. Because they make a lot of shit. Like, they make a lot of different shit. So, let me look at the super chat here, and then we'll get some thoughts from Mike J. So, Meredith Glassberg gives us $10 and says, Tuchman's Law, 1978, states, the mere reporting of an event makes it seem like it's happening 5 to 10 times more often than it actually occurs. That law came out before the internet and 24-hour news. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So... okay. So yeah, it's, I know there are a lot of people who are celebrating this, but I don't think things aren't really that bad. So what do you think, Mike?
On what?
The Gillette, the loss.
On the Gillette thing. Yeah, it seems pretty substantial when you just look at it from just the front at face value, but it doesn't really seem to have been making an impact, unfortunately, or at least not the impact that we wanted. They seem to have clearly learned nothing from this. They're already starting up another campaign, which, while admittedly does not seem to be as absolutely virulently anti-male, it seems to be both still in the same vein of wokeness, called hashtag touch of care. Okay. And I've seen at least this one pop up. It was from the VIX Australia and New Zealand account on YouTube. You can go look it up. It's VIX Long Way Home hashtag Touch of Care, and it's like they're making these little mini stories. And the top comment, I love the top comment with well, actually it's the second to top comment now with 43 thumbs up. It's like, yeah, great ad, but this has nothing to do with VIX. LOL.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's like this little story about this girl who was like abused or ran away from home or something, and then she went on to help other people. And it's like, okay, that's great. Tell me about your product. Is your product good? It's just like all the woke shows that are cropping up on that they're gonna put on Disney's private streaming service. It's like, oh, we're so diverse, and we got men here, and we got a deaf guy, and we got black people, and okay, great. Tell me about your show. Why should I watch your show?
Yeah.
Other than it's got diversity.
Yeah. You know what I think is that it just shows to me that P&G knows who they're actually marketing to. Gillette ads are not marketed to men. They're marketed to women because they know that women are the ones that buy the products. So they're trying to make an emotional appeal to female consumers who make up the majority of consumers. And I think that this is evidence of that. Now, even if women disagree with the message of toxic masculinity, or at the very least, because that's the main message of the Gillette ad, is it's about toxic masculinity. Even if they disagree with it, what they're more likely to say is, well, that's not my husband. He's not like that. So I'm going to buy these razors because I like this message. Because it reminds me maybe of somebody I, used to know, or I dated, or my neighbor, or somebody I don't like. And so I'm going to support it because I know that that doesn't reflect me or my family. And to further sort of like drive that home, other P&G products that have gotten ads have also been woke, but they haven't been woke in an anti-male sense. They've been woke in a pro-female sense. So I think it was Dove. That's a Procter & Gamble product too. And they have been doing this like all bodies are beautiful thing for a long time. And then there was it? I think that might also be Dove, but it might be a different. No. It was another Gillette product, but it was the ladies Gillette, which was the really fat model, like the really like overweight, obese woman. And it was a product for her. I don't even want to think about somebody that size trying to shave. But yeah, that was what that was about. But you see, it's sort of like a different way of marketing, because I think that they know that women make up the majority of the consumer base. They spend most of the money, and so they only need to appeal to them. And that's why advertising features, dopey husbands and enlightened, intelligent women these days. That's why all of this is just marketing. They're marketing to women. And sure, the woman who made the Gillette ad is a super woke feminist, like super woke, okay? And she probably believes very strongly in the message. But I don't know that Procter & Gamble necessarily cares. They just want to know if it's going to sell razors. And I think that's why the guy was like, yeah, I don't care if we lose some customers, because I know that we're going to keep most of them, and the numbers bear that out. So it's not going to hurt them in the long run anyway, as long as they pander to women and shame men, recognizing that men don't actually make purchases. And when men do, they usually do it their own way. So like they go to Dollar Shave Club, they go to is it Harry's? I think they're like the competitor.
Harry's is pretty popular too.
Yeah. And for that, men, you don't have to advertise to them in this kind of like pandery way. Usually
just buy a shaver.
Yeah, they'll just ask you to buy a shaver, or you do something funny. I think men actually respond to comedy a lot better in advertising. Sure. What was that?
I said, for darn sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've noticed YouTube has been, you know what? One of the first ones I saw I thought was great. It was a mattress ad, and it was supposed like they put eggs on it and like glass, and supposedly you can't break it. I forget what the mattress was called, but they had
I think it's like one of those memory foam ones.
Yeah, it was like a memory foam mattress. It was purple mattress.
They have like a glass of wine there, and they have like someone come in and do like the Hulk Hogan leg drop on there, and it doesn't move at all.
Yes. But they use a lot of comedy. It's like this skit. It's like the there's like another one where you can the squatta potty, I think it is. And, it's like this thing you put under your toilet that you squat over, because supposedly that's how people are supposed to take shits. Like that's how we were designed or whatever. And they have like this unicorn, and, there's a lot of humor. And so they use that I think that tends to be more effective. But the kind of pandery, feel good stories, the narratives, these kinds of things, that's really effective.
That was when we were really covering the Gillette thing, that was, I believe that's what they were talking about. They were discussing that, and it was basically like, yeah, that was sort of the lie that they've been pushing, is like, this is what's going to lead now. This is what people want. This is what the market is hungry for. Mm-hmm. It's like you can't just be a product anymore. You can't just sell a good product. You need to sell a good product and pander. You have to sell a good product and be socially active.
Yeah.
And, stand for social justice and want to do all these things, because apparently that's
Yeah.
That's what the millennials are hungry for.
Yeah, or
And,
that's what or at least that's what the people believe that the consumers want. It's like how, you ever notice that video games are no longer marketed as video games when you have developers and publishers talking about them, but rather they're framed as experiences because they're trying to make it bigger than that. It's like the way, if you ever watched Mad Men, Don Draper was always trying to say, okay, so buying this product can't just be the product. It has to be more. There has to be a lifestyle associated with it. There has to be an emotional connection because he knows that women are the ones that buy it. And that works. Like you make it about like a story. So when you make a video game or a film, you want to sell an experience that resonates with them because that's what they're going into it for. It's entertainment. But when you're selling something like ketchup, you can't really expand on the ketchup. You have to make it more than that. You have to make it about tradition. You have to make it about or use a celebrity, or you have to do something else so that there has to be some status associated with the ketchup. And I think that is some status can be the fact that you're using the same ketchup that Cardi B says that she likes to use. Or you say using this ketchup is good for your heart, so it's like a health-wise thing. Or this ketchup is made with, it cares about the environment, so you're doing some greater good. And so this is the way that they market. And I think that the Gillette thing is, it's all directed at women, and that's why, they're going with the narratives and stuff. And I'm sorry, but that's effective. If there was a way to do that with men, which there is, you can sell men products based on comedy and sex. But you can only do that so much, and I think that a lot of advertising companies are getting woke on the sex thing, and so they don't think that that's a good way to market products. So if you can't market products to men based on sex, it doesn't leave you a lot of options. So there you go. But anyway, that's the story about Gillette. So now we're going to move on to the last story. And thanks, guys, for hanging in. Oh, I should look at some super chats. I got some super chats here. Also, let us know what you think. I'm curious about whether or not, because this wasn't intentional, but it just turned out that only me and Mike J are on. So I don't know if this flows better or worse or what. Let us know what you guys think. Do you miss Hannah? Do you wish that we would just shut up and she would just get her on, or what? So, all right. French Honey Badger gives us $10 and says, I said it before, you don't need to avoid all of P&G. Avoiding Gillette is enough to send the signal that the ad campaign wasn't acceptable, and if a branch fails, they will change marketing direction. Well, I hope you're right, but I think it's women that'll have to be they're going to have to be the ones to boycott it because they're the ones being targeted with the advertising. So, all right. So last story, talk about this little California university story. So UC, that's University of California, and Cal State Fullerton students have filed a class action lawsuit to clear the records of those who have been wrongfully punished by the university's disciplinary system. Why am I struggling with that word? Both UC and Cal State have issued new policies and procedures since the U.S. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos had proposed the new Title IX rules aimed to strengthen due process protections. Under UC's new policies issued just this week, students dissatisfied with preliminary determinations can request a hearing. Previously, hearings were only granted in limited circumstances. Cal State's new policies now allow hearings in all cases before determining whether sexual misconduct had occurred. Previously, hearings were held only after sanctions had been proposed. Mark Hathaway, the Los Angeles attorney representing the UC and Cal State Fullerton students, said the revised policies still fall short, so we're not done yet. According to the LA Times, quote, he said they continue to prevent accused students from presenting a full defense by barring, for instance, direct cross-examinations by their representatives, as DeVos's proposed rules would allow. End quote. From the LA Times, additionally, quote, Breck Sokolow, president of the Association of Title IX Administrators, called class action a clever approach that would make legal action accessible to potentially thousands of students unable to afford personal lawsuits. He said more than 300 students across the nation have filed lawsuits challenging their Title IX outcomes, but he estimated that as many as 20,000 students at the nation's 4,500 colleges may have been disciplined for sexual misconduct. So, pretty good news, and I mean, at least it's some progress. So they've actually managed to make some small successes here, and I think it's promising. Do you have any thoughts on that story?
It's just like when you're trying to get anything big and heavy moving. Sometimes just getting any traction is the first step, and that's kind of what sounds like what this is. It's just starting to get those wheels moving. It's just starting to get the wheels turning. Yeah, we might not be up to full steam yet, but the fact that we've just gotten this boulder rolling is a good start.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, the Title IX thing is tough, and it's like we should all know this already, but just in case you don't, simply, let's say, simply like getting a new administration in the office will not reverse these things that have been in place for so long. It's going to take, and we shouldn't necessarily be waiting for people in positions of authority to just act on stuff. We need to let them know that these are a priority. So we have to be vocal as well. So this is why this happened. I mean, Betsy DeVos got it started, but she needs to follow up. And so the students that filed this claim, this suit, I gotta say, man, good on you. This is good. So there's still a ways to go, and they recognize that, and they're going to keep on pushing. But this is a step in the right direction. It's just that, you know, like you were saying, Mike, the wheels of justice, they turn very slow. But they do turn as long as you keep pushing. So let's look at some super chats, and we will wrap this up. That's all we got. I don't know. That's good, though. It's 6:09. Okay, so Egregious Charles gives us $2 and says, I miss Hannah. Well, she misses you too, I'm sure. Miles Kinslow gives us $5 and says, hey guys, just want support. Joe Rogan just had Bernie Sanders on. Thoughts? I don't know. I haven't seen it. But I suspect that I'm just going to go out on a limb and predict that the Bernie Sanders Joe Rogan conversation went something like this. Fishes. But really, we're just monkeys. Also, have you ever tried DMT? And that's basically the whole thing. 2 hours. He's going to ask him about legalizing marijuana. Bernie Sanders is going to say yes. Anything that you ask Bernie Sanders, could you make this free? He's going to say yes. And then he's going to say 1%. So Joe's not going to... I don't know if they had an argument or a debate. I really doubt it. It was probably really, really cordial. So, Mike J, do you have any other thoughts on any of these stories, including this last one, or Joe Rogan and Bernie Sanders, for that matter?
Wow, that's. I'm gonna have to watch that to see what happens, but I'm afraid it's probably just gonna be a softball fest.
Yes. Did you see when he had Cornel West on?
No, I didn't.
Do you know who Cornel West is?
That name sounds familiar, but it's not. I can't make the connection.
He's a black man considered one of the thought leaders of the black community. He's a professor of philosophy at Harvard, and he is a straight up far left socialist that believes that, in that we live in a white supremacist patriarchy, and that we need to seize the means of production and all that to make things right, and he cares about equality, and fuck white people and fuck men. And so he had him on, and it was a big softball fest as well. They ended up talking about music a lot, and all of his appeals, despite the fact that he's a professor at Harvard, were emotional. He was just like, I want artists to be able to create, and I want people to be able to love each other, and we need people to be like giving, and there's no love anymore, and blah blah blah. Also, socialism is good, even though that means it has nothing to do with love. but it's good because love somehow. Anyway, it was bad. It was bad. But I watched the whole thing. I sat through it. So I'll check out the one with Sanders and Joe. But that's neither here nor there. I'm more like curious if Sanders can stay awake for the length of time that he was on Joe's show. And I'm just curious about that. So Robert Michael says white supremacist patriarchies are the best patriarchies. Okay. Anyway, so with that said, we're going to go into the after show where we're going to be looking at this story, Disney turns down Sylvester Stallone series because it's not female focused, as well as, let me reload this page, as well as, this is not One Angry Gamer. Sometimes I have troubles with these pages. Black Widow writer not interested in canon that is discriminatory to her value system, i.e. Hertz Whammon. And if there's time, we might look at this one from Pluralist that says, typing lesbian into Google now results in way less porn thanks to LGBT activists. I don't even know what that's about. I don't know.
Made a mistake. Go back. Go back.
Okay. So with that said, I'm going to head into the after show. I want to thank you guys for coming on this week's HBR News Show. Please, again, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment related to any and or all of the stories that we discussed on today's show. What do you guys think? Do you think that the shootings that we've been seeing that have been so reported on and discussed, and people have been playing these political games with them, is it a crisis of masculinity that is misdiagnosed as something else because it's not politically convenient to talk about masculinity? Do you what do you guys think about the story? What was the other story? Oh yeah, the Gillette ad. What do you guys think? Do you think that the boycott is working? Do you think there's a point to it? And also let us know what you think about the lawsuit at the California universities. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Thank you, Mike J, for coming on. Otherwise, I'd be like on here by myself, but the show would go on anyway. But thanks for coming on and hanging out with me. And especially thank you guys for joining us on this week's HBR News Show. I have been Brian. You guys have been awesome. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one.